Alrighty, so Cultural Conversations is a safe space for teachers to understand and learn about their students' culture and background. So I would love to get some feedback from you guys on Twitter. So feel free to follow me on Twitter at Simply Bria and also hashtag Cultural Conversations so that we can get this word going. So I emailed earlier to you all the norms, a list of things to do, a list of things to say when you don't know what to say, as well as a note catcher. So I hope that some of those things were helpful to you all. I have a cultural conversations binder. So of course I don't expect you guys to have this. I told you I've really been working. So, but I do think it would be helpful for you to have some type of notebook or journal just to kind of keep up with your notes and your memoirs throughout our time together. So I'm asking everyone to please be an active participant, be open to multiple views, and be respectful of speakers and colleagues. So my hope is that participants will be able to listen, learn, and lead. Listen to one another, learn new experiences from one another, and then lead within your classroom, your school building, and your community. I'm hopeful that these cultural conversations will be impactful beyond your classroom, within your personal life, within your career. Hopeful that they'll be able to spark a new sense of thoughts for you that may not have crossed your mind. So, to all of my lovely teachers that are wondering, how does this fit into anything? Because you're getting PD hours for it, that's how. So, woo, 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 woo. Can we just give a major shout out to Erin Kirby? I just have to. Yep, she doesn't like it, but I love it. That is like my, But, so we have figured out how do cultural conversations intertwine within our teaching license, within Project Coach. How are these things that we're learning and are going to learn play into our instruction? So I'm just going to give you guys a couple of seconds to look at the 6 domains that we identified as being relevant to cultural conversations. And we did not put this on Employee Online because we didn't want to make it available to all the teachers in the district right now. Not quite ready for that. But by you guys having the information, we're tracking it. And so at the end, you guys will get a really pretty cultural conversation certificate to say that you are a culturally responsive teacher. So speaking of culturally responsive teaching, and that's just the note catcher that I sent to you guys earlier. So I hope that some of you guys are able to print it out. But yes, speaking of culturally responsive teaching, so can I get a raise of hands? Yay, Carrie! I see your note catcher. Speaking of culturally responsive teacher, I feel like I'm talking to my class now. Did y'all do y'all homework? How many? Oh, I see it, Greg. How many of my friends did their homework? Alrighty, so this is the part where I'm like, I'm gonna stop talking and I'm gonna let you guys jump in. So chapter 1 talked a lot about climbing out of the gap and understanding the nature of the achievement gap. There are a lot of things that are going on that we see, that we know these things already. The question is, what are we gonna do to fix it? So we know that there are achievement gaps. We know that there are disparities. How, as educators, do we play a part into fixing this? So when you hear the term culturally responsive teaching, what does that mean to you? And just feel free to unmute yourselves at any time. If it lets you.
When I hear it, I think of being respectful of the culture. Not really questioning as much and not trying to pretend like I understand it completely, just respecting it.
Hey, Miss Bradley.
Hey, girl.
That's my teammate. All right, anyone else?
In my own words, I set it off as like culture responsive teaching is learning about how your students think and believe, like as a group outside of the classroom, and how you can make your classroom curriculum open to their way of learning as it's influenced by that.
Agreed. Craig, you know I'm gonna have to pick on you because you You've done a lot of study into this book as well. So do you have anything to add in just as far as what is being a culturally responsive teacher?
I think it's being able to acknowledge, recognize, and celebrate the cultures of not just the students that we see, because I've taught in schools that were predominantly African American or predominantly white, but understanding the cultures around us and bringing those things inside of the classroom. Just thinking of how it was until actually I can't think of a book that I had in elementary school. Well, there was Snowy Day, but elementary school, middle school, high school, where there was a kid that looked like me. And we didn't read those books. And I just think making sure that that's a part of your everyday learning, having the kids being able to see themselves in the characters and other things, that's a part of what I think when culturally responsive teaching is bringing it in. That's what I think. I could be wrong.
No, this sounds great. Sounds great.
And like, I guess a comment I want to make is that kind of going off what Greg said, is really thinking about the culture, maybe even thinking about race, but also thinking about kids in the world that they live in, right? The world that our students live in, as far as technology, as far as race relations, as far as economics, is very different from the world that I grew up in. So really thinking about making places for what they know as well, right? So a lot of contemporary books that actually have kids in the books playing games that they would recognize, and really, thinking about it that way as well. That it's not always a conversation about race. It's also a conversation about how their culture is different from the lives in which we live.
Ooh.
Such an interesting extension from what Thomas was saying. I love how you brought in like their technology and whatnot into it. I was in a classroom she was a brand new teacher, and I was in her classroom, and she was, I don't remember the text that they were going through, but it was at Howard, and they had charts around the room, and they were talking about like what's okay, what's the culture look like in your neighborhood? What's the culture look like at your school? How is it different? And then they started really kind of those, why is it okay to talk like this here but not here, and what are we saying here that we're not saying there? So isn't that interesting?
Very. We're gonna tap into that, Erin, just a little bit. So thinking also about culturally responsive teaching, what are some of your assumptions about culturally responsive teaching, or maybe even myths, I guess we could say, in a sense?
I think that Ashley, sorry, I'll share my video, Bria.
Are you fine? Hey, Rachel.
I think that Ashley kind of started talking about that. I think a lot of times when people think culturally responsive teaching, they just think about race, but you've also got to think about religion. You got to think about your students' interests. You have to think about sexual orientation. I think a lot of time LGBTQ gets left out. So it's, I think that's a myth or an assumption that a lot of people have about it.
I agree. My mind went there first as well. I think I may hit this coming up, but culture does not mean race. If you came to my first session, you would have realized that I came up with this idea because once digging into the work, it was like a spider. Like I felt like a spider. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's just like it continues. It builds off of each other, off of itself. So culture is way deeper than race, but it is also so easily identified with race. So it's kind of like where we begin, I guess you can say. So I thought that's what I had next. When you hear the word culture, what comes to mind? So I said race comes to mind for a lot of people, but for myself, I think of disabilities. I think of, like Rachel said, the LGBTQ community. What comes to mind when you think of culture?
I think of systems like in how they work, whether it be, I grew up overseas in Asia, and how they think and how they do things are very, very different. And when I came back to the States, I had to learn a whole new culture here and way of doing things. And I don't look Asian, but that was my growing up and what I was saturated in. And so I think of just the systems of how things are done and the mindsets of how things are done. Not good or bad. It's just the way it is. So
Yes, and I'll just add 2 cents. My father was in the military, and the culture on the military base, so to speak, is completely different than maybe the culture that's even outside of that base. I spent years in Germany, and just being in the military and having folks from all over the world in the service, I got to experience folks from Thailand, folks from Okinawa, and folks from Korea, and folks from Germany, and just seeing the different aspects of their lives. Their culture was not just, oh, their skin's different, their whatever. It's what they ate, what they celebrated, the things that they cherished, the things that they considered sacred in their family units versus the kids next door or the people next door and how they saw the world. So I guess culture is the lens of the folks, different people, be it celebration, food, music, it's all wrapped into part of what a culture or what makes up a culture in my mind.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead. No, please, Maggie, you go ahead. My question, Kuwait.
Just to piggyback off of Miss Green and Mr. Bagby,
Please call me Greg.
Okay, Greg. A little less extreme of a difference is like, because y'all are talking about like overseas and different countries and stuff. Me, I'm from a very, very small town, Middle Tennessee, and just moved here this year. And so my kids and I have talked about like things that I did when I was in middle school, because I'm young, and they're like, oh, you're not that much older than us, whatever. And it's so different because I couldn't walk to the store, or I couldn't walk to my friend's house because it was 20 miles away because I was out in the country. And so like even just on a smaller scale of not just different countries, I mean, I still lived in Tennessee. I used to live an hour and a half away, and our lives and our culture and what we were surrounded by changed us and changed that culture so differently, even just an hour and a half away from each other. And so that was like something that I noticed so far this year as well.
So I wonder, and this was something that I think ties into what Maggie said as well, but Miss Green, you're the one that really kind of made me go, oh my gosh. How did everybody feel the first time they walked into a grocery store or a store after like we were on lockdown? Like, what was that like for you?
right.
You know, for me, I can tell you that my heart was beating fast. My hands were sweaty. I didn't know where to stand. I didn't know what was too much. I didn't know if people were going to make fun of me because I was socially distancing, or if I was going way overboard or way underboard. I didn't know if I was wearing my mask the right way. It got stuck in my mouth. It was so awkward, right? But then that makes me think, like, yes, defensive. That's right, Dawn. Like, my defenses were up. Like, I felt like I had to, like, okay, you can like to pump myself up the first time. And it wasn't because I was scared of germs. It was because I was scared of being judged. And so then I'm thinking, man, how does that feel for anyone coming into a different culture? And what could we do to make that a little easier? And what does that do to you physically when you're, and mentally, whenever you're like prepping like that, right? So I think we all kind of got to experience that in a very tiny way comparatively speaking.
And, you know, I think culture also goes beyond, I mean, because I moved from the mountains of North Carolina, a small kind of, what you're talking about, Maggie, a small, very small town. And the racial diversity, we had, because of the university, there were people from all over the world, but it was so much smaller scale. But culture can also, to me, be like different schools have different cultures. I mean, the school I work in is wonderful, but the school I came from, it's a very, very different culture, you know, from school to school, how things operate and how, you know, so it's, I don't know, it's grander than just a country you're from, your skin tone, you know, so much more to me.
Agreed. Sorry, I was getting my laptop charger because I was like, the last thing I need is for my laptop to go dead. So, I'm gonna kind of go past this one a little bit fast just because I know we can get wrapped up in time. So, thinking, what is your understanding between culture and race? For myself, you don't like culture and race are tightly related, but they're not the same. They're not the same. You don't have to be of a race
Right.
to be of a culture, and you don't have to be of a race to not be a part of that culture. So I just think it's like an easy default for a lot of people, like, oh, race, culture, yes, the same thing. Like, no, it's not. So thinking as we go, we're going to go into a breakout room at this point and just kind of reflect over what does it mean to be a culturally responsive teacher and what were some of your cultural experiences growing up. I sent this out to you all earlier about what about when you don't know what to say, like, So I'm not going to read this because I hate reading to teachers, especially, and I gave it to you beforehand. So therefore, I trust that you guys have the confidence to be able to be empathetic listeners, empathetic understanders, and just have space for growth because we know we can always grow. So Erin's going to facilitate, bus us into our breakout rooms. Erin,
Hey, host, so I can do that. So one thing I want to add about the active listening strategy is that in thinking about talking to each other when we don't know what to say, right? We kind of addressed that a little bit in the empathy versus sympathy the first time that a lot of us were together at New Teacher Academy. So hang on to that and maybe even look back as she's making me co-host so that I can set up our
so I'm just gonna make you the host because I can't make you the host.
We got this, y'all.
I never get to make my
anyway, as I'm setting up the break rooms, then let's think about you know, maybe if we could go back to that active listening slide for just a second, and what is one or two phrases that maybe you think, oh man, that would have been helpful, and I might have to try that phrase out. Bria, do you want to go back for just a second?
There you go. Now, you're the host now, so I can't. But they have it, Aaron.
Okay. Okay. So what we've done is we are creating your breakout rooms. All right, Bria, you want to tell us about it?
Yes, when you go into your breakout rooms, I said 7 minutes. Y'all think we need 7 minutes? 5 minutes? 5. Let's go 5. All right, 5 minutes. And how would you describe your cultural background?
And so in that, remember, I want to pull y'all back to even what we looked at. Let's see, what we looked at New Teacher Academy, okay, with our own culture and our own experiences. So, you know, that's your truth. And so you get to share that right now. Okay, you ready?
Hi, is it just us?
It's just us.
Yes.
Hey, Lauren. I'm glad I got to be in a breakout room with you.
Hey, I'm driving. I'm sorry. This is it's not very safe.
You're totally fine. No hands on the device, okay? All right.
I didn't want to miss it.
I appreciate the support. All right, Ms. Green, thank you for starting with sharing your experiences. Like, thank you for giving people a little bit of a safe space, you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
Appreciate
absolutely.
It. Are you with Ms. Martin at Eastside? Is Ms. Martin your math coach?
Yes, she is.
It's like one of my best teachers.
I had to think because she does the upper grades and I'm in the lower grades, so I had to.
When you said, I'm sorry, but when I saw Eastside, I'm like, you get to be with Ms. Martin?
Yes, I do.
Yes. Okay. So, so for myself, I would describe my cultural background, my growing up, as being very different than a lot of my friends. So I went to all Black schools. I didn't go to school with a white person until I got to college.
Wow.
Yeah. going to all Black schools, and I went to all schools in Chattanooga. So how does that happen? And it's 2020 and people are still going through schools with only students that look like them. So when I began college at UTK, the University of Tennessee, it was a total culture shock for me. And so I was raised with two very different lifestyles almost. My mom was very, very hardworking, and my father has his doctor's degree. So I really saw two different lens of life, but I know that a lot of my friends did not get to see the experience. All they saw was the environment that we lived in Chattanooga. So that is what has driven me to the point I am at today. So I'm an advocate for Black students because I tell them all the time, I was y'all. Like 10 years ago, I was just y'all. Anyone else?
I'll go. Oh, it doesn't matter. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Lauren. You're
okay.
Good.
So I also grew up different than a lot of the people that I hang around now. I went to Lookout Mountain Elementary School, and then I went to GPS, which is rare, just to be honest, for any Black girl to have that happen to her. And so for like half of my life, I never saw anyone who looked like me. None of my peers, none of my teachers in the curriculum. And so that's actually why like I made the decision for 6.5 years to teach in inner city schools. And now actually I'm back at GPS because I wanted to give back to those girls, you know, who looked like me and were going through the same thing. So I had that experience, which, like I said, it was very different, and it was really hard for me to relate, you know, to like the Black community because I just had a very different experience than most people. UTC was actually the most diverse I had ever experienced growing up. So my parents tried to keep me very balanced. So I would go to Lookout Mountain, but then they would send me to like Southside Recreation Center to throw some balance in there. And if you're familiar with that rec center, then Bria's laughing.
Yeah, because I know.
But yeah, so that's just a little bit about me. Again, like I said, I grew up very different than a lot of the, you know, my peers around me now. So yeah.
All right, somebody gotta go. We got 30 seconds left. Ah! Kirsten, go for it. You're about to.
All right, yeah. Born small town South Carolina, moved to San Antonio, Texas at the age of 10. So huge culture shock. I feel like I got the best of both worlds in the southern part of the United States, and then out towards the, not quite the Midwest, but close to it. So yeah,
Sweet.
That's my 10-second spiel.
Sweet. I think it's gonna bust us out. Yep.
Everybody.
They make me host again.
I was trying to reset it, and I thought I'd reset it, but it didn't work. So
Can you make me the host again, Erin? Got it. And let everyone fall back in. All right, thumbs up, good breakout session, friends. All righty, so I am going to keep it moving. So next, we are going to dig into African American and Black culture. Maybe my favorite part of this presentation, just maybe. So in thinking of some new learning targets, I want you to be able to, or I'm hopeful that you guys will be able to discuss the role of social values, family structure, and religion within the African American and Black community, as well as identifying culturally responsive teaching strategies to implement with students, especially students of color. So Webster's dictionary defines the term African American as a Black American of African descent. So I will be, as I have been, interchanging the terms Black and African American throughout this presentation. And so just forewarning. All right, so I kind of paused because I was like, no, wait, I'll set it on the next slide. So I wanted to begin with this just because I felt as though it was a good icebreaker, because I know that a lot of people are sometimes in an awkward position, like, what is politically correct? Is it Black or is it African American? Doesn't matter. To most Black people, it does not matter. And I think a lot of people that are not Black overthink it way too much. So in saying that, though, I will admit it took me 25 plus years to have the confidence to say I am a Black woman. Think I just found that confidence about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. Ms. Washington, you're on, but I did a speech for the Boys and Girls Club, and I had to stand up in a room full of people that did not look like me per se. And I was hot, I was sweating, and I knew, like, I'm very emotional, a little bit dramatic, but I knew at the end I had to say, I am a proud Black woman. My voice cracked. And in thinking, thinking back, I'm like, why am I so scared to say that in front of a room of white people? But I am now at the point in my life where I'm like, you know what? That's what it is. That's what I am. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there to show my vulnerability, to just say, like, this is a reckoning to a lot of Black people in America right now, with just a lot of things going on, just taking confidence and taking pride and, like, not being ashamed. It is not a curse to be Black. It is a blessing in many ways. So being Black is not just a race. It is an entire culture. But like we stated earlier, you do not have to be of that race to be of that culture. I have plenty of friends that I know that can relate to one culture more than they can the other culture, and they're not of that race at all. So just because you may see a Black person, Lauren was just in a previous session with me that gave a great example in saying how her growing up was very different from a lot of her peers. So she didn't get to be around a lot of Black people, and so her perspective is growing as all of our perspective is growing. So just wanted to say thank you, Lauren, for being vulnerable and sharing that experience with us. I think it is important to note that Black people come in a variety. There are different socioeconomic classes, different educational levels, different religions, different everything. It's as though with everything. So I guess it's kind of just like, don't group us all into one, because every Black person is not the same. Greg is not like me. Ashley is not like me. And that is beautiful. So at this time, Ms. Varner is in another meeting, so she was not able to join us, but she dropped me a treat in my inbox earlier today. So I would like to take the time to be able to share it with you all. All right, are you still able to see?
If you don't know who Edna Varner is, some of you may not be aware of who she is. So do what, Bria?
No, I said thank you for.
Oh, yeah. So Dr. Edna Varner is she was a longtime educator and administrator in Hamilton County Schools, and she works at PEF now. She is over the Project Inspire program, but she's also on a lot of boards. She does a lot of philanthropic work. She has got the greatest heart for teachers, and she often co-presents the classroom management session that's coming up later on in October, the challenging behavior session, because she's been there, she's seen it, she's done it. So this woman is so high up there in my opinion. She is definitely a mentor. So to get to have, I know Ashley's like, me too. So to get to have her tell a story, narrate, just her story is incredible. So this is exciting stuff.
All right, can everyone see my screen? Just making double sure like that. It looks like a video is about to play. All righty.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you in person, but I am delighted to join this conversation via video to talk a little about my experiences with the connection between church and family. I grew up.
So some of y'all are still seeing the slide. All right, sorry, let me, we can see the slide. Let me try to reshare it. Is better now? All righty, here we go. Right over. All right, Charlie's.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you in person, but I am delighted to join this conversation via video to talk a little about my experiences with the connection between church and family. I grew up right here in Chattanooga, attended Chattanooga Public Schools, taught in Hamilton County Public Schools. I was also a principal. I grew up as the daughter of a Baptist minister. I was an English major and a history major. So I have studied this relationship between church and family and why it's important for you to understand this. So I will start by sharing my screen. A hallmark of African American culture has always been this importance of the family. And one of the ways to provide hope for the family and the chance of a better life has always been through the church. Long before there were churches, African Americans gathered in groups because they found hope in religion. And so one of the ways they would deal with the frustrations of slavery was that whenever someone died or when someone was killed or even when a slave ran away, they made up folk tales as in these folk tales by Virginia Hamilton. And the idea was that the people could fly. And so when life just got so hard, what the people believed was that they would sprout wings when it became unbearable and they would just fly away. And so the people who remained behind believed that one day they too would fly away to a better place where there was no slavery and to a place where their family was waiting for them. Now, as I said, I grew up in the church. And the church became known as your church family. And so you were very close to those folks when everybody grew up and maybe went away. There was a tradition, and the tradition was an annual homecoming. And some of you are very familiar with this. At least once a year, the church would celebrate homecoming, and everybody in the church family would come back home. It didn't matter where you lived in the world. You were going to be back home, and it was a day spent telling stories and a day spent sharing a meal together because that's what families do. Now, there are other examples of this strong connection between family and religion. And one of those we call the Divine Nine. It's a collection of 9 African-American sororities and fraternities. And while you may know of them as fun-loving groups that do all kinds of things they may not be proud of in college, but some people don't understand why Black fraternities and sororities stay together long after college. Symbolically, becoming a member of a sorority or a fraternity is connecting with brothers and sisters. During slavery, and people who've read history know this, families were all often separated. And so you would lose your parents, but you'd also lose your brothers and sisters, and sometimes never see them again. And so symbolically, joining fraternity or sorority is like finding those lost brothers and sisters, and you are committed to them for life. And after college, after the fun of college, you connect with the alumni chapter of your sorority and fraternity, because it's about serving mankind, serving the human family. And it has a particular emphasis on the Black community. Now, what does all of this have to do with you as teachers? It is incredibly important that you get to know the families of your children. Historically, Black people have not been able to protect their families. They could not protect them during slavery. Even today, Black parents cannot protect their children against racism. They cannot protect their children against poverty, but they still feel this strong need to protect their children. And as you see here, if you want to see a woman come out of character, mess with her kids. And that's why sometimes you get that reaction when you make a call on the telephone and a parent thinks you're the villain. If you haven't built that relationship in advance so that a parent knows that you are working in tandem with them to make sure the child is successful, you may get a negative reaction. And you're getting that negative reaction because that's that historical intent to protect your family from something that may not be best for them. So I hope that sheds just a little light on the connection of religion and family and why it's so important for you to make sure you bond with the families of your children so that you can be on the same page working together.
You rascal, you kept that from me.
Really did.
Jeez.
I just went to church. I don't know about y'all, but I think I just went to church. That was excellent. So now, Erin, I'm going to switch back, make you the host so you can throw us into breakout rooms. I did give us 10 minutes on this one, which is still good. We'll be at 5:55 or so. But yeah, let's reflect on Black culture.
Yeah, I'm not the host yet, but I know I will be in a second.
There you go.
So something I encourage you to do that we didn't necessarily kind of set the stage for you to do, but I am sure that you had some wonderings and some noticings as you were listening. So I encourage you to share those with your group. As your there, oh, your groups are smaller now. Woohoo! Okay, so I encourage you to share those with your group because man, that affected me. So I'm gonna set it. How about, do you want to do 7 minutes, Bria?
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Y'all ready? Enjoy.
Hey, Hannah.
Good evening, y'all.
All right, so y'all know I want to hear what y'all got to say.
That was really eye-opening for me. Coming from, I mentioned this in my last breakout room, but I was raised Catholic, and I did have several Black friends who described like their religious experiences, and mine was seriously formal. Like my grandfather, he still had church mass in Latin at 8 a.m. in the morning. And he described it as a very like formal experience. It was almost just like an education, but to hear like the sense of family and community that Black people get from their religious experience, I can tell how that shapes the students that walk into my classroom. Because I know I have mainly Hispanic students, but when I like do lunch duty or something, like the Black students are always talking about what's happened after church or what happened around Sunday, right? Like things like that.
What school are you at, Thomas, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm so sorry. I'm the band director at East Lake Academy, first year teacher.
Great. Congrats.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've got a question. So help me understand. because that was, I really appreciate what she said, but that was also my experience. And so as far as church and it being, I didn't ever join like a sorority or a fraternity, obviously not a fraternity. Maybe I tried that, but but how, I'm not quite sure what I'm trying to ask.
So how is it not just specific to the Black community?
Yeah.
I think you're trying to say. So I would say when my dad and I were thinking about this, it's interesting because there's a parallel in the Black community. I used to work at Orchard Knob Elementary, which is Churchville. It has the most churches in the community in the parameter in the area of Chattanooga. It also has the highest homicides and crime rates in XYZ. So it's very, like, the church is a big part of the Black community, but it's almost sometimes just there.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's like you have to have the family connection that's already there, or like you have to have a true God calling to want to go into the church. So the church does play a major role in the Black community. But if you look at the churches are attended mostly by older Black people. So it's still a generational thing where my generation may not be so inclined to go to church because we don't understand the aspect of it. So I think I know it's not specific to the Black culture, but I know that, like, when some people hear, oh, Black people stay in church for 3 hours on Sunday. Sometimes we really do have to stay in church for 3 hours. But it is the significance of that place. And it's almost as though like a washing of sins. So it's kind of almost as though, like,
interesting.
I've done all this stuff all week. Like, okay, my mom used to play, like, she didn't play bad music, but on Sunday, that gospel was playing all through the house, all day Sunday. And I'm like, I guess you're erasing everything you did all week. So it's just kind of like that recovery. It's almost as though I'm going to go talk to someone in the other side. Like, help me out, Hannah. What is that?
So I really think too, like, it's kind of, Ms. Green, kind of how you said, hey, like, I can relate to that. I 100% can, down to the homecoming piece. Because I'm from a small town in Alabama that, I mean, very much growing up, we had that homecoming where, like, there was one, like a Sunday where everybody was potluck. Right. You know, so I can totally relate to that. But I also think that's important to know, like, that relatable piece is, I think, what Edna was really trying to push.
Right.
But also understanding that while for some of us, it's more about religion, right? Like, for African Americans, I really think it's more about more than just the religion. It's the getting together and being a part of a group and being a part of a community that understands one another.
Right.
And I really think what I loved about her video, not to take away from the religion aspect of her video, was really talking about the fraternities and the sororities, because it is extremely different from our cultures. Like the sorority and fraternities that, I mean, I was not in one, but I went to Auburn University. And so, like, the fraternities and sororities at Auburn University do not promote that. Sure, they're together and they can call themselves a family while they're at Auburn, but that piece that carries them past, and that alumni piece where they, you know, go back and they're with one another and their goal is to serve after being in college, I thought was a really awesome thing to hear. Yeah. But also hearing that piece of, again, the commonality between the church and the sororities and fraternities is having a group of people that you can turn to that's in addition to your family.
Right.
Was my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, that was good.
And I also think that a lot of the times there is that extended kinship that's not always understood. So like you said, Erin, it's that family. I have a family that have no blood relation to, but that's the bond that has been built. And a lot of the times I can call them before my own family. So I think it's, just more so that connection and that bond. And I agree with you, Stephanie. I like how she included that as a commonality, because I'm from Alabama as well. It's a Southern thing, really. So it's really geographical. It's really, it just really, I think it's more geographical, honestly. I'm sure that Southern Blacks are different from Northern Blacks. I mean, it's just, yeah.
And I would be a mess if I did not. I have not introduced myself formally either, but I am Bria's instructional coach at Woodmore. Okay. So, and I have to bring up the fact of how she talks about that mama. that defensive mama. So like, I cannot tell you enough how important relationships are. When you're having that difficult conversation and you don't have that relationship, it is going to be their first reaction to be super defensive, and for the reasons you heard exactly. So if you are aware of that, but if you also like cushion it and build those relationships, I promise you that they will immediately will be like, you know, a team effort.
Right.
So please, please, please communicate.
Relationships.
Yep, huge.
I mean, yeah.
I'm making you hook.
Okey-dokey. Whew, my heart's still beating fast from this video.
We need to do 15 minutes next time.
I know we could have kept going.
Right? That you could have had a lot longer in that small group, couldn't you?
I agree. We got
Definitely.
We have another one. It's not it. It's not over. We're gonna have another breakout. I'm just trying to be respectful of everyone's time. I can go to 8 o'clock, but I'm trying to get us done by 6:30. All right. So next, I'm going to hop into Chattanooga culture. So I believe of everything that I have researched and learned, that this has been the most interesting part. Most definitely, this has been the most interesting part, just because with the Black culture, I'm like, okay, I already know that stuff, or not, I don't know it, but like so much like we've heard it, I just kind of extended on my learning. But a lot of this stuff was brand new learning. So I took the time to interview a lot of older Black people from Chattanooga, just because I wanted their eye. I wanted to know what happened and why are some things still the same? Because it's been 70 years, literally. So I want to open up the discussion right now just for if anyone has any knowledge of when there were once Chattanooga City schools and Hamilton County schools, about school transformations, because a lot of the demographics of the schools have changed over the years, as well as the old locations of schools. So I just kind of open this up for anyone to kind of speak up if there's something that you know that you would like someone else to know.
So I'm definitely not like a native of Chattanooga. I didn't get here until June, but as I've been driving around a lot, especially around the East Lake community, like I've seen like the old school buildings. There's one down Dodds Avenue. I forget, it's named after somebody, but like there are a lot of schools that like I was like, oh, I haven't heard of anyone from there yet, but that's because it was an old segregated school, that is. And then as far as I've seen.
School.
Right, like there's a charter school, it's down and yeah. And then like I know like when I was first getting here, someone was like we were like looking up things about Chattanooga and it's like, oh, Samuel L. Jackson went to school here. And I was like, oh, we could find his high school, but we couldn't because that high school doesn't exist anymore.
The building exists, just not the school.
We're going to talk about it.
So
right, yeah, the building's still there. Actually, if Dr. Varner was on, she probably would let you know that they were in school together at the same time.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all.
Yes, she would.
Dr. Drake.
Hey.
Were you in the city system?
So no, I came just at merger.
Oh.
Yes, just at the merger. So that was like my first year. And so yes, it was interesting. So they, we were still working on integrating the schools.
Oh yes, I had the pleasure of being in the cities. Actually, I student taught in the county system, and then I taught in the city system, and then there was the merger. And it wasn't okay. A lot of the city folks called it a takeover, just because the way it worked. And it wasn't that it was a bad thing. And a lot of the county folks were afraid that they were going to move all of them. Well, okay. Some county folks were afraid that they were going to move them to these inner city buildings, and they didn't want to go, and they didn't want the merger to happen. The folks in the city, we like the pay scale of the county, so we were like, yeah, bring it on. But there were some racial issues in the sense of lots of predominantly Black schools. Okay, so my culture was mostly of a minority or majority culture white, just because on the military bases and all the schools I went to were on military bases. I didn't realize this. Anyway, when I got to Chattanooga and I student taught and I was looking for a job, and well, actually before I even student taught, they were saying, oh, you don't want to go do any observations in the Black schools, not the Black schools. And I know this sounds crazy, but my thought was, why would you paint a school black? That's the stupidest thing in the world. Because I had never experienced so much, I guess the racial divide in Chattanooga was something I had never experienced before in my life. So yes, I thought school buildings were being painted black, and no, I did not want to go student teach or observe in a Black school. So anyway, Gaston, I believe you were here in the city system. Would you like to add?
Sure. I was at the same school, and it was a city school, and then it became a county school. Our student population didn't change a whole lot because we were a magnet school to begin with. So we had always been sort of a little microcosm of Chattanooga with a pretty diverse student body. The merger didn't change that much. We kind of were afraid that it would. I think the biggest change for us was that I think on the whole, the city school system was more supportive and encouraging of magnet schools than the county school system. They started in a city system, so.
And I think that was because of the Office of Civil Rights lawsuit against the district, because the schools, the inequity in the schools.
And
right,
huge
the math case.
Yeah, and some huge federal grants.
Cindy muted herself, but yes, like the Edna McConnell Clark grant, I can't even say the words, was a big piece of chunk of money that was going to city schools if they went into the county, I believe is how it worked. But anyway, that's it.
I taught in the old city schools, and I will just say I remember the consolidation, and because I taught for Chattanooga Public Schools is what we called ourselves at that time. I remember the conversation among teachers being that we were a lot more innovative in our teaching practices, and that we were afraid that when the county took us over, we were going to go backwards and lose a lot of the progress that we had made. And in all transparency, when the Chattanooga Public Schools merged with Hamilton County, I actually chose to leave and teach in Georgia for a few years. So, but I'm back.
Yeah. So I just want to say that my experience is very different from everyone who is currently talking. So I would have been a student at the beginning of the merger. So that's when I've been kind of thinking about when I hear a lot of people talk about it. I was still a child. So I would have been, I think the first year I would have been in the first or second grade. And I was at Piney Woods Elementary School, which doesn't exist anymore. So Piney Woods is right in front of what is Willer Homes Project. And that's the community that I grew up in, and then taught at Howard for 10 years. So that is the community that I am from as well. But I think one of the things that I remember was that for students, it didn't matter. Like, I don't even think for most students that they would have even known that there was a change. It's just hearing about the change as I have gotten older. And one of the things that I think in my head, for most of the Chattanooga City Schools, even coming from being a part of the county, nothing has changed, in my opinion, in those schools in the 25, 26 years since the merger. And that's probably the biggest heartbreak for me, is that, you know, it's still some of those same issues that people said, you know, and I think of it's community issues that I think essentially come into the schools. And I have to remind myself about it a lot, because I honestly believe the resources that are being poured into those schools are still phenomenal, right? I feel like, you know, but it's still the same issues that were there when I was a kid. And that's just like, you know, the hardest thing for me is that it's systemic. And I think, you know, I always try to think about, is it a picture of Chattanooga, or is it something there?
And Ashley, really to piggyback off of that, I feel like I tell this story all the time. I don't care. It's important. I have to. I didn't go to college with people that were not, I didn't go to college with white people. I didn't go to school with white people until I got to college. I went to school 2nd through 12th grade in Chattanooga schools. There are still kids in Chattanooga schools that are not going to school with kids outside of their race until they go to college. And then we wonder how are they unprepared for the world. Not only did I go to Orchard Knob Elementary, Hardy Elementary, Orchard Knob Middle School, Brainerd High School, then I went to the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. A complete culture shock. So I always have been smart. I always knew I had the ability, but I didn't feel it in the schools that I was in. I didn't feel, or sometimes I felt way smart and then realized I really wasn't. I was actually on grade level.
Feel like you couldn't.
So
yeah. Also.
Yeah, like a lot of, it comes, wow, you went to Brainerd with those test scores? If I went to Ottawa, I would have had these test scores. So I felt a lot of value in my academics because I felt as though that brought a lot of, of course I wasn't the only one, but I was a high scorer. And so therefore I felt the value in that aspect, but as far as the value outside of my school, no. Like Greg said, I was at the black school.
Yes,
So
and that was one of the things that hurt me the most when a couple of things. I remember when I first left, I was at Orchard Knob and Brainerd for several years, and then I went to 21st Century, which was a magnet school, and people kept saying, "Oh, I know you love it there. You love it there. What do you like most?" I was like, "Well, I don't like it. It's just teaching." But I realized white kids can learn just as good as those black kids that I've been teaching. I didn't know that because I'd never taught them. And then when I would see what was acceptable, I taught at another school, and the school that I was at, they actually would do an exchange with Baylor. And I remember the students coming back just dumbfounded from what they were doing in the basics, well, I guess the regular courses at Baylor compared to what they were doing in their advanced courses at the school that did the exchange with them. And it was a public school here in Chattanooga. And the kids realized that their education was not near what the kids at Baylor were getting. And it was just, it was sad that they have to, well, not only experience that, but just know that their education is, for some reason, it's not valued as much. Education isn't as valuable for them as it is for those others, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And in a lot of my interviews, I'm sorry, Erin, but not of direct quotation to anyone, a lot of the feedback that I was hearing was, it's 2 school systems in Chattanooga. It's 2 systems. So that has to change. Like Ashley said, this is been like this for 25 years.
So yeah,
but I think you need to. So what Greg was saying though was that the difference was public school and a private school. But what you're saying is that it's two different systems within our system. I think that's what you're saying, is that although we are Hamilton County schools, there still is a city system and a county system in your eyes.
Yes.
Even though we merged in 96, 97.
Yeah, and Millie and Mrs. Green are both asking questions that I think dig into the root of it. Like 25 years later, why is this still the situation?
I want to try and see if I can kind of help. I think one of the things, so my experience is a little different from Priya's. So I grew up until middle school. I did go to all the schools that were in the South Chattanooga community. And then for high school, I went to Hickson High School. So, my experience was what she dealt with in college is what I saw in my high school. It was the first time I sat in class with kids who weren't all Black. But one of the things that I think, if you think of Millie's question, can you break down the issues for us? And I think one of the things is that a lot of the schools in the city were dealing with issues, and these schools still deal with issues of systemic poverty, right? This is generational poverty, right? That have been in communities so long that you deal with. So how do you come out of that? And really looking at now, we are charged, all of us, we're all educators, are charged with educating those students. And it comes to our idea of culturally responsible teaching is how do you educate those students, right? So one of the things when I think about my culture, I've had to come to the understanding, Miss Elizabeth Zachary, she was in the county for a long time. She just retired, and I'm so excited for her. She actually had a conversation with me, and she said what happened with me is I literally won the parent lottery. Okay, everything from my mom taught me how to read. I didn't have a teacher that taught me how to read. My mom taught me how to read. My mom taught me how to speak with people. My mom taught me everything that I should have learned in school. My mom did before I got there. I feel like I live a very sheltered, isolated life, even outside of my community. I played with my siblings. I played with my cousins, and my mom tried to keep us away from everybody else. Like, how do you pour into people? How do you start pouring into children? You know, even had a conversation a few years ago at Howard. We were a part of the Bill Gates when they were doing the picture. They were trying to transform schools. I think it was called, can't even think what the program, but they were doing this contest for people to come up with the visions of what school looked like. And we really had a conversation at Howard. Is that what does it look like if we literally created a boarding school on our campus? Literally move these kids outside of the community and let them stay there, because it is a systemic issue. And some of the issues are things that now what we have to think about, and it's a great conversation, really is just about cultural responsive students. And these are the students who are in front of us. You know, how do you educate them? Like, how do you figure that out? And sometimes even as somebody who grew up in their community, working at Howard for 10 years, I had to step back and remind myself, while I was a part of their community, I was very much outside of it as well. You know, and really thinking about, you know, how do you teach those kids? How do you teach these kids in a way that makes sense to them? And also show them the importance of what you're saying. Because if it's not important, then it doesn't matter. Because what I have to think about, especially when they get to older grades, is that a lot of these kids, they're just thinking, I can be at home helping my mama pay bills.
Feels. Thank you. Thank you all for being.
Some really powerful things that I feel like I need to think about for a minute. The idea of a boarding school, and then how does that play into honoring, you know, family and what's important. And golly, there's so much. That's so packed. So many layers.
Oh.
And Ashley, I need to stop talking. I'm thinking of my airtime. Thank you, Ashley. I appreciate that. It's so true. Your mom did an excellent job, and that was one of those things. That was just a fight. Of course, you've worked at Howard. You've been there, and just a fight with breaking the system. How can we break the system in the sense that not only is education valued, but it's seen as one of those things that we need to have the kids as early as possible getting into the things that will help them grow academically. And I will shut up.
And just kind of piggybacking off of that, I really think it's about intention, being intentional. I'm very much like Ashley. When I graduated from UTC, I had 5 schools that wanted me. I intentionally chose Orchard Knob Elementary School. I knew those students needed me. When I left and decided to come back, I intentionally went to Woodmore. I knew there was another calling of students that needed me. So I believe it's all about intention and figuring out your purpose, and the purpose drives the intention. So
but let me ask you, do you think that I don't think that this is a question that we can answer like right now, but do you think that over the course of this study, we can start to look at those competencies and those characteristics of a teacher, that even if I don't look like my students, the things that I can do to really make a difference?
Yeah,
and identify with them. Because I think that's where we can really make a difference here, right? Like in our teaching and in our practice.
So I'm going to call out Callie just because she is a model of someone that does not look like her students, yet is a firm representative of, like, I go in Callie's room and I feel welcome. You know, I want to put on my crown when I go in Callie's room. It's very inclusive. So Callie, can you kind of just like piggyback off of that, just as far as how have you become so dope?
Take note.
Take note.
How to become dope.
I come late and then I get called on the spot. Okay. I think a lot of it is one, humbling myself as a white teacher and understanding that I have more to learn from my kids than I have to teach them. So I think like the two biggest things that changed my teaching was my students. Slowly, I've been evolving from the smallest things to how my room is arranged and allowing them to take part in leading that space to how it's run, allowing them to critique me, to give me feedback. That's changed the biggest way that I teach. And then White Folks Who Teach in the Hood kind of fueled a lot of that. That's like my go-to book, really.
That's a really good book.
Allie, can you remind us, how long have you been teaching?
This is my second year and then I did 1 year in Project Inspire, and Stephanie, who's on here, was my
Wasn't
CI.
it because of my wife's class?
Oh, yes. Sorry. I meant to say,
Yeah.
number 3 was Dr. Bagby, Amy Bagby. I took a class on, I don't know what the name of that classroom is. Whatever it is, it's leading. You basically talk about race in the classroom. And
I was just kidding on that, Kelly.
I know you are.
Hey, Callie, you need to take a minute and talk about what you have in your classroom that really is inclusive of your students. Be specific.
And if you can show pictures, that would be great, because I love your classroom.
Gosh, I don't know if I have pictures of it right now. I really work to make sure they're represented in my class. So from the books that I choose to display, like, you know how you display books on top of a library, to I have artwork in there that looks like my kids. So I asked artist friends to make me art, like beautiful art of young kids that are Black, because our school is 98% Black. Historically Black in college universities, I reached out to them trying to get them like to give me posters and things. I only got I think I have like 1 or 2. And then I think a really important part of that was I allowed them to put the artwork up. I allowed them to, we did an art gallery. I feel like the most important part is really allowing your students to lead the classroom as a white teacher. I'm gonna impose my whiteness on them if I choose to lead, or I could allow them to lead and they could run the classroom.
Can you say that one more time?
Go ahead, Callie.
Yeah, Callie, I think you need to say that again. I think that was that important.
Oh, just my whiteness. If I choose to teach from what I know, then it's excluding my kids. So if I allow them to lead the classroom and run the classroom, then that is their space.
With respect, but give them their ownership. It's our classroom. It's theirs. Yeah.
And I wanted to say this really quick, and I'm gonna do the same thing as Greg, kind of watch my airtime. But I wanted to say that I wanted everybody to make sure that we understand that it's also not a conversation about race. In the 10 years that I was at Howard, something happened that was very different from the 150 years that Howard High School was available. So when I first got there, our school was about 98% African American. And within those 10 years, Howard is now a school that's about 60-40 Hispanic African American. And as a teacher who grew up in the neighborhood, I also had to learn to check myself and make sure that my Hispanic students' culture was also a part of my classroom. So being someone who is all about African American literature and YA and making sure my students see their self in everything that we read and how my classroom looks, I also had to make space for the Hispanic community in what I was doing in my teaching as well. So it's not just a race thing with Black and white, it's also making sure that you look and see that you are also making space for other people's culture if you're not reflective of the students who are in your classroom.
I agree, Ashley. It's like anything else. So I guess I'm thinking about, I've been teaching my students about Bangladesh and how they don't necessarily learn the same things in America that we learn. It's about what's relevant to your environment and relevant to your culture. So I thank you for saying that, because that is one thing that I want to keep reiterating, culture is not race. This is not just about race. It is about, if you have a student in your classroom of a different culture and you bring some food one day possibly, and they can relate to that. I mean, like, it can go so deep. It's as simple as a picture in a room, or as deep as something beyond that. So I've had on your screen for you the Midtown data. I'm not like the best with data and all of this, but so we know that these 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 schools are within the Midtown. And look, all of the schools I went to are in the Midtown. So this is the data, the proof to show you that that was the truth. And so I, of course, am a data cruncher. So I was like, okay, so what's the teachers look like? What do the teachers look like that are in Midtown? I just touched my neck. And yeah, about right. So I put them next to each other just so we can kind of look at them to see. I couldn't get the percentages, but when thinking about why has there been slow change, how is this still the same way? Why are turnovers the way that they are, and we're having to like keep doing this every single time? It's lack of consistency, in my opinion, in a lot of things, and just this is a hard job. This is a hard job, and thanks COVID, it's getting harder. So I just kind of want to like leave it open because I think, yeah.
I just notice things. What are you wondering? What are you noticing here?
And feel free to take a picture of this, write that down. So in digging into the data, I realized, oh, that's what I was going to say. Our experiences may sound very Black centered, but that's because Ashley, Callie, and we teach in Black schools. So therefore, that is why our relevance, that's our reality. I realized when doing this data that I teach population-wise, and Woodmore is a small school, but it is the highest percentage of African-American students than any other school in the district. I teach at the Blackest school in the district, and I'm Black, and I went to all Black schools. And so it's just this year, knowing that information has driven me even more. So I kind of think just when you really look at the data and really look at your place within that data, it's a good way to kind of just like maneuver you as an educator.
Brienne, how has that changed you as an educator?
I go hard.
Knowing,
I mean, I've always been a hard teacher, but I feel as though my kids need me now more than ever.
And that comes back to the idea of, oh, that poor baby. He didn't get any sleep last night. He didn't get any breakfast. He just needs to go over in the corner and sleep because I love him. You need to love him enough to hold him to the same standard that you hold everybody else and provide some scaffolds, right? Mm-hmm. And that's hard to learn. That is hard to learn whenever you've got that big heart to not want to just coddle and take care of. But who's going to take care of these kiddos whenever they're adults if we don't teach them how to have strategies to overcome, right? And that we believe in them enough to do that. Now
I'm just going through the chat box, looking at some of the comments that have been made in the chat box. Time is and Ashley, I may be contacting you all because I'm doing Hispanic Heritage next. So the next are in 2 sessions, but I plan to dig specifically into the Hispanic culture. I want to know more, so I'm gonna need you guys' help with that. So I
can help you with that. My school is mostly Hispanic now.
Yeah, I can, and to my teacher friends that I know have gone and taught in like 2 totally different cultures. I know teachers have taught in one building with one demographic and gone to another building and been totally knocked off their rocker. So I kind of came up with this quote. I kind of thought, to live in the future, we must understand the past. So on your screen, you're looking at the bottom 2 pictures. It's an old downtown Chattanooga. All right, disclaimer, these are from Google. So Google said these are where these photos are from. But when I look at the backdrop in the mountains, I'm like, that's probably Chattanooga because I can see the mountains in the background. The top 2 pictures on your left is an old elementary school that used to exist. It was East.
Marsha, don't leave yet. Hold on. Bria, I'm so sorry. Marsha's about to leave, but guys, can we say thank you? I know she doesn't want me to do this, but can we say thank you to the Chief of Equity, who made sure that every teacher all of our new teachers that attended, that signed up for this, got a copy of this book. it's her department that did this for us. So can we all say thank you just briefly, and then she can go.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was great.
Thank you.
Alrighty. So kind of going, oh, and in the top right corner is 21st Century. What was formerly known before 21st Century, it was Brainerd Junior.
Junior high.
Yep, my mom went there. So the building still stands there. It is right off Brainerd Road, like in a little cul-de-sac loop in the back. But as Thomas was saying, if just drive around. You drive around Chattanooga, you're gonna see buildings like, whoa, did there used to be a school? Like you can tell the buildings that were once schools. So I got to thinking, once again, these are courtesy of Google. But Riverside is, oh, so I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, so I may be wrong, but did Samuel L. Jackson go to Riverside, or was Riverside? So yes, the school is still there. It's just not Riverside anymore, Thomas. It is now CSAS. So in talking to some people, they were saying in the late 60s, you either went to Howard or Riverside if you were Black. That's it. Howard or Riverside. And so looking at these pictures, I'm like, they look like they had fun at Riverside.
Maria,
Yes.
this sounds crazy, but I do think when I first got here,
Oh, you muted yourself, Greg.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Most of the housing projects, if not all, were zoned for Howard when I first started teaching.
And I think a lot of people don't know is that there was a housing project that sits right where, right across from Howard, where right in front of the church. It was actually a community housing project. That was Boone High. It's not there anymore.
Yeah,
that was Paul's.
Paul's home.
Paul's home.
Yeah, that was Paul's home.
When they were still there, and all the kids lived there.
Yeah. And so that's another. I don't even know if it's just in my notes in my brain, but the zoning. Oh no, it's in my notes because I'm gonna talk about it when I talk about Brainerd. So let me go. Oh God, it's 6:24. We're gonna go a little bit over 6:30, but all right, I think this was worth it. So this was Brainerd in the 1960s. I just want everyone to soak this page in. This is not the Brainerd I graduated from in 2011 at all. So if you're interested, I can give you guys this link that I've attached in the Chattanooga, did an article on this a couple of years ago, just talking about the transformation of Brainerd over the years. Brainerd were known as the Rebels, and it was a predominantly white school. And once the integration began in the city, I believe, that is when the Black students that were coming into Brainerd had problems with the Brainerd mascot, the Brainerd flag, for obvious reasons. And so for it to be 2020 and people like, this flag still causes problem, NASCAR blocked it. Like, so just to kind of see, it's just like, well, like I graduated from Brainerd and I had no idea of this stuff. And so Brainerd does an alumni picnic, pre-COVID we did. And every June, Brainerd has the biggest alumni picnic in the city. Every class from Brainerd High School comes back to Brainerd High School's front lawn. And I'm class of 2011, and I have seen it, but I didn't understand it. The tents, they start in like 1950, 60 or whatever. They go white, blah, 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 blah. The white people still come out and sit out on the lawn with the Black people, which I love. So you literally can go to a Brainerd alumni picnic and see, oh, that's when they must have started integrating. And you can see the difference in the schools, the culture, and then just thinking about the transformation. So in talking to Miss Melissa Jo Graham, she was an excellent help in this project. She began explaining to me how Brainerd in the late 80s and early 90s was a way different type of Brainerd. Miss Crystal Sorrells attended Brainerd, if you're familiar with who she is. My mother is a graduate of Brainerd High School. She said when Brainerd first when it kind of started changing, Brainerd was the elite Black high school of Chattanooga. I can believe it. But they were I'm sorry, Ms. Cox. I know Ashley. But they were the elite Black high school of Chattanooga. Everyone wanted to go there. You wanted to be in this school. Now, in my assumption, it's probably because of the fact that it was white. So with it being white and kind of like transferring over, oh no, well, that's an assumption. But Melissa told me it was because of the fact that a lot of Black homeowners were moving into the Brainerd area. Even if you still look at it today, the Brainerd area has a lot of Black homeowners. The Brainerd area has a lot of Black businesses and a lot of it's very much so that. But I went to Brainerd And the people that live, because if you go by Brainerd, there's houses across the street. Those kids don't go to Brainerd. Those kids go to East Ridge. I lived on the east side, got bussed over to Brainerd every day. The kids that live a street.
I lived in East Chattanooga when I went to high school, and it was literally kids on one side of North Chamberlain were zoned for Brainerd, and the kids on the other side of the same street were zoned for Hickson High School.
Yep. So you literally can be 2 streets over and 2 worlds over at the same time. Literally. And whose fault is that? Like when I was so like when I didn't know who to be mad at when I got in college. Like I was mad at Chattanooga. I was mad at my parents. Like they gave me as much diversity as possible, but I'm like, why is this? Why am I feeling this rage of lack of self-identity almost because of the fact of not knowing myself deep enough before I got to college? So thinking about where Brainerd is now, this is the Brainerd that we are all somewhere familiar with. It has been super interesting just to see the change of even the importance, Brainerd Howard's band, okay? The things that are that the schools value, the sports, all these championships, what the test score is looking like.
Thomas, did you have a thought?
No, if I may, I have one 8th grader who is a black man, and originally when we started the class, he really, I wouldn't say like didn't like me, but he just wasn't interested in band. He didn't think of it as something that he would want to do because he was going to play basketball, and he was convinced that once basketball started, I would let him go practice instead of being in the band class. And he didn't like the idea of band, and like I said earlier, I was trying to show. My idea was like, I have to show them like the best musical performances I can. So I was like, New York Philharmonic, the Dallas Winds, the Juilliard Trombone Choir. This is what I honestly thought would get them tagged in as just quality music, because for my past like 5-10 years, that was what was driving me. And it wasn't, it was just annoying to him. And it wasn't until I talked one day and someone asked like, hey, are we ever getting uniforms? And I looked up like, oh yeah, we are. And so I looked up Howard High School's band, like put it up and was like, yeah, we could get something like this. And he was like, oh, I see them all the time. They march, they march during Veterans Day, they march during this, that, and the other. And the first time I had like that conversation with him was when we opened up about band programs. And we started talking about like, from Mississippi, like we have Jackson State University, Mississippi Valley State, Alcorn State. And so like, from a white school perspective, like they'll completely ignore the idea of these universities and HBCUs until it's like, oh man, they're banned. That slaps, something like that. So like that was a point of connection for me to him. And, we talked about like the value of the colleges as a whole to Mississippi as we did that. And ever since then, he's been playing alto sax and he's the best one I got.
Wow. Relationships is what it boils down to ultimately. Does anyone else have anything to speak on about Brainerd before I skip on over?
I just wanted to make a comment about Howard and the band. The Marching 100 is still the greatest band in the world.
You can have it.
That's the Maroons.
That's the band my mom and my aunts, they all talk about the Howard Marching 100. They were all in the band.
Yeah. So Ashley, just for background context, and because we passed 6:30 at this point anyway, what is the Marching 100, or what, like, can you help teachers that may, like, why is that important? I read in the comments what Millie's saying, she feels now the ghosts that are in the hallway that she thought she was feeling like, because it's a lot of history. What's the Marching 100?
So in Howard's history, it was like their band was always 100 plus people. So when we have the Memorial Day parade, here in Chattanooga when I was young, and I went to see Howard's band, they were always 100 plus people. So to hear Tom and say, I guess I understand what the community is becoming, and the community has changed. But I think, in the beat of my heart, understanding what Howard's band has been for the community and seeing that, it's going to change. And I think accepting that, so the community has to start accepting that. But it was 100 people. It was the pride of Howard. So have some schools, basketball, football was important, but that band is what alumni of Howard live for. So honestly, anybody when you think of a lot of, you had early Chattanooga, you had Howard and Riverside, right? So for Howard, they were known for having this amazing band. Even coming to Howard and our kids not being interested in band as much was shocking to me, because that's all I knew was that they're supposed to be the marching 100. Did that help, Bria? Was that the answer?
Oh yeah, super helpful. I don't know a lot of Howard information, you know what I mean? So I'm just
not to overtake the space, sorry to interrupt, but like that's definitely been like really kind of the narrative of my year so far at Eastlake Academy is, the kids, they're kind of interested, they're like, oh cool, but last year, due to like a million circumstances I've heard from every which way, from the music store to the other band directors to the teachers there. Thank you. But the teachers at Eastlake Academy and the parents and families at Eastlake Academy are like, oh wow, are y'all playing again? And they talked about like the Howard band numbers going down as the music program hasn't had like a consistent director or like an active playing state, and how that's affected, like, because Eastlake, I don't know the exact numbers, but I know primarily feeds to Howard, I assume. And so like, I've got teachers like constantly coming in and out my door, students whose like the students aren't in the band, but the parents were thinking, oh, well, sorry about that. But the community's, taking note and really interested in it. So for me to come in without any context, this has been really eye-opening about like what this really means to them, as we're just like, we've got 2 notes so far in the 8th graders, but that's where we're going.
Thomas, you bring up a really important point, and I think that Millie brought it up as well, that this has been like, oh, I understand now. So I have a feeling that all of us have had that moment in this time together. So if you have to hop off, please, before you go, if you'd share that moment, or at least just take a moment to think about it before you hop off, about how this information impacts you moving forward. And then I also, if you scroll up in the chat box, I did go ahead and put the sign-in sheet and the exit slip link in there. But I'm going to stay on and listen to Bria finish and learn the rest of this. But if any of you, just from scheduling, need to hop off, I just wanted to let you guys know that that's there, and that we really want to encourage you to take something that we know that something has impacted you today, and then make a plan for how that's going to impact your teaching going forward. So, okay, now I'm going to mute.
Feedback is appreciated. I mean, this is my first time doing this, so I want to grow. So any feedback is appreciated. And then just trying to be respectful every time. So I did put some Howard things in here. So this was, so my grandmother actually went to Howard, and she talks about all the time about the sit-ins that they had in Howard in the 1960s at the Five and Dine restaurant downtown Chattanooga. And apparently there are a group of students at Howard that protested, and I have an original picture in the top left of a group of the protesters. And then on the bottom right, more so of your screen, you see those same protesters in modern day age. So it is just crazy to see that these people are still alive. This stuff is still relevant. My grandmother almost can't talk about the sit-ins at Howard without getting flustered. Like, my grandmother is high yellow, and I didn't even tell her about this part because I know it has a deep, it strikes a nerve with her. And so a couple of years ago, the students at Howard reenacted the sit-in, and it's in your bottom left. Don't have the link for that one right off, but if you just Google Howard sit-in or Howard student reenactment, there's an article out there that is about it that was in Times Free Press.
And it was last school year, so it was actually in the spring right before, it would have been right before we got out for COVID.
Perfect. And like, was that just a random group of students, or was that being taught within the school?
They're the kids who are in the theater program.
Theater program. And so as we guys were talking about earlier, just the transformation of Howard, Howard had been known as the Black school, predominantly Black. Like, it's just a lot of Black pride in Howard. So I agree with Ashley. I think the community and Chattanooga as a whole is just like, what? And it's taking some reckoning and accepting and realizing that this is the dynamics that the neighborhood is consisting of now. So therefore, things are going to change. But if you have not been to Howard in 20 plus years, and then you walk back through the door now, you would probably be totally surprised. Also, shout out to Howard. What is it? Actually, you guys won a championship for soccer, I do believe.
They won district 2 years. I think they've run district for the last 3 years. And they get really close in state, but not quite yet. But it's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen. And you guys see Dr. Ware, I can feel her energy through this picture. And I got the picture of Coco. But I know that they have an amazing leadership at Howard, and that is constantly progressing. And it's just been beautiful, honestly, to see things go from this to this. And this is just a picture of South Chattanooga. So I found this picture on the left. There's a school in South Chattanooga, Alton. Woo! I didn't realize I was going to pass it. Alton Park School. That picture is from 1966, I do believe. And then we look on the right, and we have Calvin Donaldson, which sits in the same area. 62 or 60, 62. So it's, when I was looking at this picture, I'm like, look at how differently they're posing.
And Alton Park is still there too. So if you go into South Chattanooga, down by the health center in the community, Alton Park Middle School sits right next door. So that school is still there as well.
So just kind of as a wrap up, these are some books that I got all these books, except for the new Jim Crow. But the other 4, I have all of those books. I have just really been trying to dive into understanding my own background to be able to reflect it to more people to be able to understand as well. So out of these, I know Callie says she loves For White Folks Who Teach in the Hood. Which one is also good? Another really good one. Oh, my dad talks about STEP from the beginning all the time.
And I would give a nod to Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria?
Caswell Fighter let me borrow that one, and it's whoo. I never gave it back.
He's gone.
In the book Stamped from the Beginning, there is a YA version of that book. So if you teach in a middle school or high school, it's called Stamped, Racism, Anti-Racism in You. And Jason Reynolds, who's an amazing YA author, he rewrote that book for middle school and high school students. So I would honestly recommend it. Howard's going to be doing it in a community book club soon. So it is an amazing read. I read both. I read the YA version. Now I'm going back to read this version, and it's really good.
And I would recommend too, like I was saying, I have white fragility. I want to get into the mind of a white person at sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, just because I'm Black, that doesn't mean I can't read things that can't deepen my knowledge into a specific topic. So don't shy away from something just because you feel as though there may not be anything in there for you to relate to. I also have another good one sitting right here. The Myth of Race. And just race being a myth within itself. This was a top seller on Amazon, so it took me about a couple of weeks to get it. But yeah, the more we know, the better we are. And to kind of piggyback off of that, also looking at some different movies and shows. Y'all feel free to pitch in on this one as well. I think I've seen all of these. There's an episode of Dr. Phil I was telling Aaron about. It's called What White People Need to Know. YouTube it. YouTube it. It is good. And it's Dr. Phil.
Yeah, exactly. It's Dr. Phil.
Anybody want to chime in on any of these movies or shows or anything that they may have seen or heard of?
I was going to say Uncomfortable Conversations is one of my favorites on YouTube. I love listening to them. And it makes you think, like, really think about how you view the world versus how other people view it. It's good. It's a good one.
Kirsten, do you mind sharing why you why when they see us? Can you? I'm wondering, like, what?
Oh yeah, I actually didn't get past the first episode. I'd like to finish it, but it was difficult for me to see it. I knew it was obviously a dramatized version of it, but it was terrible, not in a bad way, but it it was heartbreaking.
Millie, thank you.
It was hard for me to watch. So I think when you think about just making space for it, I knew the story, and it was probably one of the hardest things that I've ever seen on TV. And I know she said it's, I can question, like, I know some of it had to be dramatized, but, you know, I think a part of it is like, for me, it was like, it's the reality of how it happened and how so many people could sit back and allow that to happen. So just really, if you're going to watch it, prepare space for it in your mind. That's where I've had to really think about as a Black person. And when I try to watch stuff like that, stuff gets in your spirit. So I am one of those people to talk about like spirituality and what that means. So prepare yourself for it, and then be okay with if you have to stop and then go back to it.
Watch it when you're ready, definitely. Watch it when you're ready. I have friends, brothers, siblings that are caught up in the system, have been caught up in the system. So if you have that personal experience as well when digging into these type of shows, movies, podcasts, whatever it may be, emotionally prepare yourself and mentally prepare yourself, I would say. And be ready to not be naive almost. You know what I mean? Like, we do know that some of these things are dramatized, but like Ashley said, we do know that there is truth underlying behind it.
Yes. When you get into the wormhole of when they see us, and then you go back and you want to say that surely that's not true, and you look up the facts, you'll get it's inferior. Never mind.
Yeah. I haven't been able to watch it either, honestly. Like I can't stomach it. But somebody had mentioned The Hate You Give, and I really enjoyed that. I read it and really enjoyed it. I haven't watched it yet, but I heard that it was really good.
I'm just
I think as white people, it's very important that we. Sorry, Ashley.
I was being funny. The movie was so much different from the book; it just caught me off guard.
Oh, really? I haven't read the book.
I've only
but
read
I'm
the
apprehensive.
book.
The
I
book,
haven't seen the movie. I've only read the book, and it was really good.
yeah, the book, I was gonna say, we did in college, we did a culturally diverse novel study, and that was one of them that we read, and it I have said since then, every person needs to read that because it is a real eye opener, and if you don't cry at the end, man.
Which one is that? Which one?
The Hate You Give.
Okay.
The Hate You Give. Like, that book is a real eye opener. But we did a book study on that, and I was also going to say All American Boys is another one to really get into because it has the viewpoint. It's Jason Reynolds, and I can't remember the other guy. Can never remember the other guy's name. But it shows a white person view and a Black person view. It's a dual point of view novel of the same situation, and you can see how they both react to and what they both think. And I love the books because the endings aren't, all wrapped up in a pretty little bow. It's realistic endings, and sometimes stuff doesn't end happily.
And American Son is another great one I kind of thought of with Kerry Washington. Just seeing a film with a Black parent and a white parent and seeing how they were treated so differently, and they, the whole time they had no idea that they had the same child. So just a lot of these experiences that people are going through are relevant, and we still face them to this day. So, Underground is Goblins are good. I've watched more things than I've read. Oops.
Guys, I want to step in for just a second while you guys are noticing these to point out that for those of you that are joining us, this was launched at New Teacher Academy to teachers new to Hamilton County Schools. Bria, how many years have you been teaching?
This is my 5th year.
Exactly. Yeah. And Callie is her partner in this that's kind of co-working on it, right, Callie?
Wait a minute. No, wait. Sibley's doing all the work.
Well, right, that you're supporting, and that's important. And so I really want to point out that this is being led by our newer teachers in Hamilton County. Let's have these conversations by our newer teachers, right? That's powerful. And so for those of you who are on here who were with us at New Teacher Academy, like, you're showing up, you're part of this change, and that's really empowering. So I want to encourage you to continue showing up with us, because this is going to make a difference. And to those of you who aren't new to Hamilton County that came in to show your appreciation and just get interested in this and just learn more, please come back too. So, okay, Bria, I'm going to turn it back over to you now. I just really needed to step in and say, and just point out that our sweet Bria, this is her 5th year teaching, and she's doing this.
And Erin is an amazing lead on helping me with all of this as far as organization and XYZ, because it's a lot. It's a lot, but it's worth it. This is a passion project. I've said that from the beginning. Literally in June, God spoke to me and said, do it, and I did it. So I appreciate your support, because it is truly a passion project that I am doing from my heart. That is it. So if you guys have any recommendations of any podcasts, any Twitter followers, I would love for you to drop them in the chat box, because I need some more people to follow on Twitter. I need some more things to listen to on podcasts. Right now, I'm listening to Nice White Parents.
That's what I just put in there. We need to talk about that. I didn't see this.
I could not type it fast enough. I was trying to say the same one.
Oh, thank you, Carrie. Everything is spirit driven. So just to remain conscious of you guys' time, I do want to give a special thank you to Dr. Edna Varner, Dr. Warren Mackey, my daddy, Dr. Michael Sibley, Erin Kirby, Jill Landrop, Melissa Graham, Miss Glenda Means, and Mr. Robert Maddox. These are all of the people that I interviewed for this presentation. They were super insightful, super helpful, helped me craft the project, make sure it was done. And they all know I have like anxiety sometimes, so they were like, chill, cool, you got it. And I was like, okay. And so I just want to tell you all, thank you for coming this evening. Thank you for sharing your time in this space with us. All feedback is appreciated. The next session is going to be the disability culture. So if there's anyone that, and yes, Erin, LaRonda's going to help me out on that one. And yeah, so if there's anybody else, and I have a couple of friends, my mom and a couple of friends as well, that work in the disability community. So that one is going to be interesting as well. I believe it is October, whatever the last Thursday in October is. I believe it's October 28th.
29?
29th? Yes.
I don't know.
28th, 29th?
Okay.
28th. All right, so that will be for the disabilities. So now between now and then, that's what I'll be working on, but I am open to all input. If you know something, you want to schedule an interview, I would love to even have a video insert in there like I had with Etna this time, just trying to constantly think of how to make this like a roller coaster so that you're not just sitting there bored. How can I make this interactive? And one day we're going to be in the same space together. I feel it. We're going to be in the same space together. So yeah, send me an email if y'all know anything, need anything. Knowledge is power. Follow me on Twitter.
Guys, thank you so much. And way to go, Bria!
And now I can say,
so proud of you. I'm so proud of you.
Go, Miss Sibley. Good job.
Thank you, Miss
Marcy. So yeah, I need to think about like presenting content, but also like allowing for space to talk and trying to mitigate time and all that. You did a phenomenal job. I'm so
proud. Thank you. 6, what is it? Oh, my watch is dead.
Okay, don't even look at the time. Don't even look at the time, because you know what? Everybody that's still on this call was very invested, and we're so proud of you.
And it's because you guys want to be here, and that was my biggest thing when thinking of this. I don't want to make people come and talk about anything that they don't want to talk about. So I thank you all for having the courage and the space, and I'm going to stop talking because I'm going to get emotional, but I just thank you all for showing up. It means a lot.
And we can't wait to see you again.
I know.
So fill out the exit slip. Let us know what you're taking away from this today to make change for tomorrow. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you, Bria.
No problem.
I will say, just a note, just for your idea about if you really look into Hispanic culture, one of the things that I did a few years ago when the transition at Howard first came, I actually wrote a letter to the Chattanooga Times Free Press that they ended up publishing. There was an article in the paper about Howard students and we're not having a baseball team and all this stuff. And I wrote an article about really looking at the picture of our school and what our students wanted to do. It was the year they started our soccer team and there was this big uproar, but our kids wanted to play soccer. So it's kind of really thinking about the change and really looking at East Ridge as well. So they're facing a lot of things, probably the entire of Missionary Ridge, but what East Ridge, I had a conversation with Ms. Sorrells at East Ridge High School the other day, and she really talked about helping the East Ridge community understand who their school is, what their school has become, because the East Ridge High School does not necessarily look like the business community in East Ridge. And that's hard for a lot of people to understand that their school is not what their school was either, and how so many of the schools are changing and evolving, and how you get communities to be accepting of that.
Definitely. And I'm going to reach out to, or I already have, but Renee Brizon's going to help me with the Hispanic as well, because he is awesome, as well as, Callie, what's your cohort name? Mr. Ramirez. I've also contacted, Ramirez was before you, Callie, I think.
Jonathan Ramirez.
Ramirez, yeah. I believe he's before you, but yeah, like I can't do this by myself. I don't know the answers. So Ashley, I'm probably actually going to reach out to you again when it's, because it's disabilities and then it's Hispanic.
Okay. Dyer at Howard, they'll be able to have a conversation, a big conversation about what's different about the East Ridge community and their Hispanic population and the Hispanic students who go to Howard, because they're very different communities. They're very different group of kids who are from very different economic backgrounds. And that's something for me to remember when thinking about now working with Howard's Hispanic community and the Hispanic community at East Ridge High School, in the East Ridge schools. They're very much different background communities. Come from different families.
Good to know.
So just think about it.
You with Stephanie Bautista. She teaches at Eastlake, I think.
Oh yes, I love Miss Bautista. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna let you all go. Thank you all so much for just letting me participate.
Oh no, thank you for coming. Always welcome.
Really great, y'all. Thank you so much. I hope y'all have a good evening.
Thank you too, Erin. Thank you for everything.
Food.
We'll meet sometime another time.
Yeah, I'm proud of you. Hey, listen, I want you to rest tonight, and then let's talk. Like, do you have Riley this weekend?
I had to think about it. Yeah.
No, that's because you know what? I've got a lot of time next week, so I'll help you. We can edit the video and get it ready. It'll be great.
All right. I'm about to say I got to break down benchmark data this weekend.
No. Why don't you let me do the video? Hey, why don't you do that? Just let me do it.
Okay, I'm stopping the recording right now.